The reason no one has ever hung up after an episode is because I said that, by the way.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That's why.
There's no way to test the counterfactual, so
Yeah.
we'll just go with it.
So we'll never know.
That wasn't even like, that was not part of the opener, but we all did it. And Skylar was like, that's going to be in the show.
Yeah, it was good. It was like the opener.
I really liked it.
It definitely had me laughing as I was walking through the Nashville evening.
3, 2, 1, and
all right.
beat after one.
Are we ready?
I love it. Yes.
We are ready.
All right. I've been getting all these public record request emails back.
Mm-hmm.
A week I will, just send it into the city to let them know that I'm still here.
They're like, oh, that's Kempa guy again.
You're like the PRA Macworthy.
Yeah, there's probably a better use of my time. But I sent a few out recently, and I realized from reading these hundreds of pages of city emails that Mayor Steinberg has 2 extra email addresses. So most city council members have their first initial of their first name and then their last name at cityofsacramento.org. Steinberg has that, dsteinberg at cityofsacramento.org, but he never reads that one. I learned by looking at these emails. The only ones he reads are mdsteinberg at cityofsacramento.org.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yes, fellow journalists, PRA this. And so I've started just PRAing like all of his emails from this address now, because it's like, well, I'm not, now I know he uses that. And I just the other day got like 350 pages back. He also has a Gmail account, which, as we know from the Kevin Johnson years, can cause him some trouble too. I'm working on that, folks. I will get back to you on that. But one email that came up on the MD Steinberg thing that really I found interesting was from June 17th. A city staffer, I forget who it was, but they were very angry. They sent an email to this construction group, real estate group, that is doing the renovation of the convention center, downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the convention center renovation is so far behind that they are worried that they're not going to be able to have it ready for the opening of Hamilton in September.
Priorities.
And the city is furious.
Yikes.
Like Alan Burr furious about this. Aaron Burr.
Aaron.
I don't know who Alan Burr is.
Some guy sitting at home drinking a Coors Light, probably.
Yeah, he's like, what did I do?
But they sent a whole email about how this is unacceptable, and you've got to, everybody needs to be working overtime, and you got to blah 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 blah. Now I'm super interested by this, and I want to follow up with those email requests. But this is some news for you folks. This might be why, what's going on with why people were having trouble buying their Hamilton tickets early on.
Yikes.
Because there's going to be no place to watch Hamilton.
This just like, I get that the convention center is like intended to be, a gathering place for the city. And I totally, love and respect the arts. But I also just like, there's something about some of these very strange priorities that get people all like riled up, that just feel like this is a lot of energy when we could just be like, here's the new dates. Mm-hmm. Right. And it kind of reminds me of how last year's budget in the middle of the pandemic was released with like this new soccer stadium on the front cover. It's just like, why do we do these things? And why would the city budget have a projection of the or like a rendering of the soccer field on the front cover of all the things that we're going to spend money on? I mean, I'd rather you just put a picture of Chief Hahn and be like, this is what we spend our money on. but why I just don't understand. So I'm just really confused about some of the ways in which we seem to prioritize our time and our attention in this city.
I mean, like that can be said for so many things
Oh
in
yeah.
the city of Sacramento.
So many things.
Well, I ended up listening to Hamilton soundtrack today before the episode after I read that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Fired up and ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
I
Well,
watched
if
it
they're
on
not going to
Disney
come,
Plus.
maybe we can do like a little Hamilton in the park. If it does.
That's probably where Hamilton should be happening anyway, considering that we're in a pandemic.
That's
Yeah.
true. All right, I'll reach out to
Delta variant, Epsilon variant, Lambda variant. Like, we're gonna go through the whole Greek alphabet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
All right, my Hamiltonians, shall we start the episode?
Let's do it.
Let's go.
Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And Shannon.
And Flo.
Skylar comes back for one episode, and it's the one where I'm gone, and it's very fleeting. It's like he wasn't even here.
Yeah.
And I'm sad.
Yeah.
How
I
was
miss
it?
you, Skylar.
Is he good? What was it like?
I mean, did you listen to the show?
I did, yeah.
I was like, you've actually seen him in real life more recently than me, so I don't know. How is he?
This was like, it was I think there was this moment when Skylar was like, I've been so busy with my job that I don't know what's going on. And also I get up early in the morning and work all day. And I was just like, oh, Skylar.
Love to see it.
He's a white collar man, just working 9 to 5, doing the whole Dolly Parton thing.
He works hard for the money.
So hard.
Well, I miss him, and I'm sad I missed him, but I'm thankful you all did such a beautiful episode. It was a very, sometimes when there's like 3 of us, an episode goes off the rails. Usually it's when Flo's gone. This was there was like kind of a surreal episode to listen to. So for those of you who aren't patrons, $5 a month, go back to last episode and give that a whirl. It was quite an experience.
It's like we like brought you the commentary, but we also brought you the goofiness.
And you had comfortable like silences too. When I'm on, I'm like terrified of dead air. But on this one,
we were all
very chill.
We were like, so anybody want to talk now, or are we just
anybody have anything to say?
Yeah, all right. Anybody know the answer to that question that was thrown out there that was not in our prep email?
Because we didn't have one.
Rip it off the cuff.
It was good.
Well, I'm telling you, folks, it was fantastic, and you can tell they put a lot of work into it.
We put our heart.
There was a lot of heart into that one. Well, why don't we just get into today's episode? Today we're going to talk about the city of Sacramento's master plan for homelessness. And now for a lot of folks, we have listeners all throughout the country, and you might be like, how does this apply to me? It does. Why? Because our mayor, Darrell Steinberg, is known as sort of the czar of homelessness for the state of California.
That's actually his official title.
Yes, he drives
Homeless czar
policy on addressing homelessness, and this goes all the way down to LA County, where there are 10 million people and where our homelessness crisis is probably relatively the most deeply felt, right? People are impacted very, very hard down there, as well as throughout the state, as well as here in Sacramento. But what he does here, this is him testing out what he wants to enact throughout the state. Not only that, when he does this stuff, the entire country listens, right? He came out at the end of June with that right to housing plan of his, right? Which has a lot of concerns, and it's actually not directly related to the homelessness master plan, but we can discuss how they are intertwined and why advocates' concerns are very, very valid as they consider what happened last month regarding this right to housing thing. But basically, he came out at the end of June this summer with this right to housing push, saying that, like, well, everybody, we need to have enough housing or shelter for everyone outside. And then he sort of appended it with this stick saying that, well, and if they don't accept that housing, then, you know, there's going to be consequences for them. Right.
Yep.
Which a lot of us, that raises a lot of alarms. But after he did this, after he came out publicly and did this push, on July 2nd, San Jose Mercury News came out to do a piece on this. They reached out to him. I know this because I know his email that he actually uses, and I read through it today. On July 2nd, the White House and HUD reached out to him to discuss this, right? So this is now national. On July 1st, ABC News reached out to have him on Good Morning America, right? LA Times he's been speaking with, you know, locally KFBK, all this other stuff. But like what Darrell does regarding homelessness, this will affect everyone in our country and everyone in our state. Maybe I guess I didn't spend too much time on that, but I just wanted to sort of set that in stone first. Yeah. So on Tuesday, August 10th, the City of Sacramento City Council will be voting to adopt a master plan on homelessness. Shannon, can you tell us what exactly that is?
Yeah, so it's officially called the Master Siting Plan to Address Homelessness. And I think it's important to note when this all started to sort of give us a little bit of a timeline. In December of 2020, the mayor calls for this plan, right? And says, you know, he needs like all of the council to come together and come back with their sites that they want to potentially house or where they want to shelter people. They adopt a resolution in January of 2021. In February, there's a workshop. In March, there's a workshop. At the end of April, there's another workshop for District 4, 8, and 2. In May, another siting workshop for District 5, 6, and 3. Another workshop mid-May for District 1 and 7. And then the master plan starts to be drafted in June and July. And so here we are in August.
Okay.
With this plan. So the plan is a collaborative proposal, which the collaboration comes from all of the council members in the 8 districts, where they were asked to identify shelter and like housing spaces or like safe parking, safe camping spaces, any of these services or configurations. And the whole thing was to help folks with a pathway to exit homelessness.
And this wasn't the first time, right, Shannon, like that this charge had been issued to the council. This has been issued several times by the mayor during his tenure around everybody needs to find some sites and some solutions. And there's always been a little bit of like hand wringing about that and some being more proactive than others.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I couldn't tell you how many times the mayor has called for this, but it's certainly more than this one time. Mm-hmm. But this one time, there was more of a push from the mayor, and it came with a little bit more anger and maybe even hostility, because we're talking about a time when the winter was particularly bad here.
Right. It's after
And
the night of terror in which 6 folks died in a storm outside.
right. So that's when it was adopted was after that. So
Mhm.
after
Right.
that night after January 26th, so the night that
Right.
those 6
Right.
people died. So that resolution then was like, the gavel saying, now you all go out and begin this work.
So can somebody tell me?
And I only brought that up just because I know the Measure U committee last year in our counter proposal to the budget said, how about you spend some money actually on housing and homelessness? And how about you target making sure that there's some money to do some of the siting for each of the places? And I think we allocated $1 million per district in our recommendations. And that was in the middle of 2020 because we didn't get a chance to do it as part of the budget process. So that's why I was like, I know that this conversation has been had for many years over time to really, and it was just kind of left up to council members to decide if they were going to take it on and if they were going to identify any sites or move any projects forward. For folks who don't know,
Flo is the chair of the Measure U committee. This is it's a advisory committee of citizens of Sacramento telling the city where effectively these Measure U tax dollars should be going. And, I'm focusing also my question towards Shannon for folks who don't know, because Shannon is an expert in homelessness. She's been working in the services for a long, long time now. And she does run Mary House, which is the daytime drop-in shelter for women and children experiencing homelessness in the region of Sacramento. Shannon, can you give us, what are some of the raw numbers, at least that they're claiming the numbers are in this proposal? How many people are they claiming they're going to get sheltered, housed? How much does this cost? All of that.
9,820
people per year.
Yeah, and that's so the thing with this is so that they would be using some of the existing facilities. They would be using some of the new priority sites that were brought forward by the council. And then there's also like motel conversions, motel voucher programs. There's housing vouchers, there's scattered site shelters, all of these things. And I think one of the things that's important about the master siting plan, the vote that's happening on August 10th at 5:00, is that what this vote does is it not only says, go ahead and move forward with the sites, but it also unlocks it says here, like it gives the city manager authority to start drawing down funding for all of this.
And the funding, it's about $100 million.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, and it is largely state and federal. It's state and federal money, largely federal as far as I recall, because this is money that is coming, post the worst of the pandemic, as many people understand it, though I think that's potentially arguable based on who you talk to. And this comes from like the Biden administration. So yeah, it's $100 million in the fiscal year that will be approved along with the sites that were proposed by the 8 council members.
Okay. So that's our general, that's our, 10,000 foot view, without giving any sort of opinions so far on this, whether it's good, whether it's bad. Right.
Yeah.
And we can start in on that whenever you want. But I was thinking, what if we talked a little bit about the op-ed that came out in the Sacramento Bee by our 2 most progressive city council members on Sunday, August 8th. That would be Katie Valenzuela of District 4 and Mai Vang of District 8. It's good to see them working together after Mai voted to, put a restraining order against Katie's staffer, but we won't get into that today. But they did write this good piece together, right? In what they are arguing, and listeners might have differing views on this because this is sort of a firebrand topic, right? Or sort of a lightning rod. They're arguing that this is a very good and a very important step forward. They are appending that argument with what we really need is affordable housing. And until we have affordable housing, there will still be a bottleneck to the problem of homelessness. What are some thoughts on this piece?
I mean, I think they're right. That I think the part at the end of the article where they, basically said look, these, eviction protections are set to expire. And when that happens, we run the risk of having even more people, joining this population. And so, yeah, absolutely. Right. That's how this works. And so these solutions, these policy solutions have to be coupled for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, that it's no mystery that in order for any plan to address homelessness to actually work, the end result has to be housing, right? And our community just doesn't have it. Or we don't have enough affordable housing, right? So we don't prioritize affordable housing. Sacramento is effectively pricing people out of their housing, and by continuing to side with developers, they effectively have decided to keep people poor. So out of one side, they build, these loft apartments, designer apartments, and charge market rate for them. Market rate is bananas. And then on the other, they're like, here's this master siting plan to address homelessness. When really, if you just coupled those two things together and had an inclusionary housing policy, which says that every time housing was built, a certain percentage of that housing has to be affordable, so that you then start to sort of level out the playing field so that people actually have access to housing, right?
Yeah. Well, and this is why there's enough housing in the country for everybody.
Right.
We have expensive housing that sits empty,
right?
Just because it's worth it for them. It's worth it for these rich folks to leave these expensive places empty. If we were to do mass construction of public housing throughout the country, this would drive down housing prices of the owners of capital, and they don't want that. They benefit from people being unhoused.
I think the other part of this is something that is really important as these conversations around making affordable housing available to people who are experiencing housing insecurity, is that there has to, at some point, if the governing body, the folks that are holding the reins for addressing the crisis, in this case, it's the city of Sacramento because they have authored the master siting plan to address homelessness. Somebody has to be in charge of rapport building with landlords and creating policy which says we can't have landlords who are gouging people out of first, last, security, show me this and show me that. How many times have you been evicted? All of this sort of stuff. And I know there are tenant protection programs, but tenant protection programs exist for people like us who are able to navigate those programs, who have access to the internet, who have basic computer literacy, or I would say above average computer literacy because of the number of forms that have to be filled out. We need landlords to work with people who have been, because of systems of oppression, kept out of housing and help with that, right? So I think about like master leasing as a really great way to help people get into housing, which is where like the city of Sacramento would have a giant, like would have a lease, which is the master lease on multiple properties. And then the leaseholder is the city, who is then in partnership with the person who is experiencing homelessness. And that's where you start. And that is like a service partnership, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there are lots of different ways that this could be addressed, or this master siting plan could work a little bit better than what it looks like on paper right now. I think there's just a little bit of creativity that's lost on it. A lot of it is like very prescriptive of what we have seen time and time again that has not worked time and time again. For example, a partnership with Sacramento Steps Forward as like, you know, and with various service providers who are out there that just like don't have the capacity, the bandwidth, the experience, the rapport to work with people, or you know, the understanding of what it's like to work with people who are chronically street homeless.
Right.
Yeah. And I think, you know, at the risk of outing us as, you know, a leftist podcast, I think we have to also have a conversation about, you know, divorcing housing from capital.
100%.
And the idea that we have to make money off of all of the housing that we provide. The answer is we don't have to. And so we need to be thinking about, how do we do more cooperative housing models? How do we, you know, set things up for, you know, for financing of people who are going to buy homes where we're not protecting banks and not people, right? Like one of the silliest things that people are required to do is make a down payment to buy a house. So for the people who are actually even able to get there, you save up this nest egg and then you hand it over to the bank so they can cover their losses. But then when your roof goes out, you just handed them thousands of dollars that you could have spent on your roof, or that you could have spent if somebody lost a job continuing to pay, you know, for your housing. And so you actually put yourself at risk of not having housing to be able to cover the bank's losses in case you're at risk of not having housing, right? And so those, like all of those ways that we insist that housing has to be something that's money generating, whether it's for landlords or for anyone else, before we get to the place where we provide it for people, is contributing to this crisis. And I just can't, you know, we can't have this conversation without also saying sometimes you just won't make any money. Like not everything is a profit generating, you know, venture, and that has to be okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all of this, and this is a conversation for us to have over and over again. Can I put the horse back in front of the cart?
Yep.
And let's look at the plan as it is. Do we agree with Katie and Mai that this is important to pass on Tuesday, August 10th?
It's a really hard, you know, it's a really difficult question. I think as someone who finds myself doing the work that I do, but I think that the plan as it stands right now needs more work. And do I agree that it's important and that it could change things, you know, for the better for lots of people experiencing homelessness? Yes, if there was more robust energy put into it, because I think, and part of this conversation that we might be getting to is where the deficits in the plan actually exist.
I think we're used to decades of any enactment of anything regarding homelessness failing because there's no investment in those things, right? The infrastructure, the people power, the rapport building.
I mean, it kind of just like reads a lot like a bigger scale of the rapid rehousing program that existed back in like 2010. I mean, there are versions of it that still exist, but you know, it's where you put someone into a shelter or a motel and then get them into housing and help them pay for that. And then at a certain point, like the money, you know, dips off and they then become responsible for their rent on their own, and then people begin to experience homelessness again because the services don't exist. It just feels like a plan that would be that doesn't have all of the pieces there. I just don't understand how this plan is actually supposed to be effective without the housing piece. So like, does it make sense to support it on Tuesday as a good faith effort from the city? Sure. But in practice, and as an advocate, I think that there are some really glaring problems with it.
I don't know what I was expecting today, but I thought there might be a little more enthusiasm from you. So that's really interesting to me. And I went into this episode, I don't know. I came into it with I don't know if I'm pro or against. I know that more shelter is good. I also share, I think, the same concern that a lot of advocates have, that is this shelter being made now just so they can harm people again in the streets? Yeah. And yeah. That's a thing that if Darrell doesn't stop saying that, well, if you don't take that shelter, if it's there, then, there's going to be consequences. That's a problem,
Yeah, there's a lot of it that there are these hinges that fall on like punitive justice, even if it is civil. And again, leaning back into capital, the interest of capital, and a failure, I think, on the city's part to understand where there need to be more services for people. Like our local government has actively pulled money away from services that people experiencing homelessness need in order to get through day to day. For example, mental health is one of those things. You experience a crisis of homelessness, you're going to experience any number of traumas. If you didn't begin to experience homelessness as a result of your mental health, you are very likely going to have an onset of mental health symptoms during your experience of homelessness. We just don't have enough mental health support. We don't have enough alcohol or other drug support. We don't have enough parenting support. We don't have enough childcare. We don't have enough education and employment programs.
And you can cite unhoused folks all you want, but unless they have this safety net, then we can't make the serious progress that we all want to make.
And it feels a little bit like, and I think that I I tend to be pretty cynical, and I want to say there is, and I have said, there are some good things about this plan. Mm-hmm. And I think that, District 4, Katie Valenzuela's district, has really, they really went out and they did the work, and they came out with all of these different sites, and they, piloted this city sanctioned safe ground.
Right. She showed a proof of concept, right?
100%. I think there's some great stuff, and I don't want to knock the people who have actually done the work and have a clear understanding of the landscape of homelessness as it is right now. But I think from my perspective, I am just really tired of these sort of performative solutions to crises, right? This whole thing was born out of a horrible night. I mean, the idea came before, and it's come multiple times before, but a horrible night when people lost their lives. And then we saw certain council members not give as much energy as others did to this plan. Mm-hmm. And we have seen certain folks continue to perpetuate stereotypes against people experiencing homelessness. And we are in this plan, we are seeing the systematic just exclusion of people to we're pushing people experiencing homelessness into areas where people of privilege don't necessarily have to see them, don't have to be bothered by them. So it's not like a full, so this isn't a thing that like in the beginning, it was every district has to like absorb part of this crisis and address it with their district resources, because, you know, we got to share this responsibility. But but we're not seeing that happen. And how is the city supposed to gain the trust of people experiencing homelessness if they just continue to be pushed further and further into the margins? Like,
right.
I don't want to, I was going to say, I swear, I don't want to muck this all up. At the same time, I want it clearly stated that I just think it needs more. I think it needs more. And I believe that Sacramento can do it. And if nothing else, what this master siting plan to address homelessness does is it gives advocates, people who are at the front of the mutual aid effort, community groups, service providers, it gives all of us a blueprint for where we have to be prepared to get the work done, because the city isn't. Right? Like, because these are all the things that they are incapable of fulfilling. And so how can we come together as a community and as people who want to support people over profit and fill in those gaps? So glass half full?
Didn't sound full at all.
I'm sorry.
I mean,
no. You did, and you work in front of this every day, and I think you have every right to have the frustration you have, right? You told the story of what happened that night, and those 6 folks passed away, and like it's unconscionable, and I think everything you say and the way you say it is totally valid. So sorry for joking about that.
No,
I mean, Shannon, I'm with you. Like, I share the optimism, and I'm incredibly thankful that we're doing something. And yet at the same time, I find myself underwhelmed and really sympathetic to a lot of what, Crystal and Anthony and the homeless union are saying about, this doesn't address some of the challenges.
That's Crystal Sanchez and Anthony
Price
of the Sacramento Homeless Union.
Yes.
Also of the California Homeless Union.
Yes. And there's a piece that they published in the Davis Vanguard really outlining, why they are opposed. And I think there are all the points that they make are really salient about, what Shannon described in terms of there being this like punitive element of it, and this being a way to potentially then try to circumvent people's rights when the housing that's being provided is neither, permanent, nor for some people will it necessarily be, safe. And I don't just mean safe in terms of like who's there, but I mean in terms of like, congregate settings and things like that, it just creates this feeling of like, yay, we did this thing, but did you do it well? And I know that there's a saying that perfectionists try to adopt, which is that done is better than perfect. But sometimes that doesn't quite cut it. And sometimes it has to be done at least with a minimum level of quality. And that's where my concern comes in about this, because I would love to see the city of Sacramento adopt a housing first policy, which was actually, we will commit to housing, and then also taking all of the additional services that are needed to be able to support people to stay in that housing. Because I think that's actually a really cost-saving model. And I think it's a really effective model as well, because you can stop all the resources that you're spending trying to, give people tickets and trying to criminalize them for being on the street. You could actually dedicate those resources after you build the housing to keeping people housed and to supporting them and all the things that Shannon was talking about earlier. And I just find myself constantly, I know that there are these conversations that you have to have with people who are far less willing, to do anything, but this does feel like it's underwhelming in its scope for a place that claims to be so progressive and claims to care about these issues. And I just find myself constantly having this kind of existential crisis about California, where I'm like, yeah, at the state level, you say you care about these things and you have an $80 billion, excess in your budget. And then many of the things that should be funded don't get funded. And the same thing is happening here at the local level. It's just, in some ways, it's demoralizing.
Yeah.
Because you're just like, this can't possibly be the best that we can do. And you have to be able to see through you have to be able to see the challenges already in some of what you're proposing. And if you can, then why couldn't we do something different? And this is a political will issue. It's not even a money issue.
Right.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying about what Crystal and the Homeless Union wrote in this Vanguard piece, that there are valid concerns that everything brought forth with this policy is done with the thing in the back of the mayor's head that it will allow him and our city and our county to perform state violence once again, right? To perform sweeps, to terrorize folks who have nowhere else to go. On top of that punitive level, there's also something that Nikki discussed on a couple episodes back. When she was talking about Project Room Key, there's a carceral element where once you do get into the shelter, they have all these things that you can or cannot do. This isn't your home. This isn't a place where you get to do and live how you want to live. You will have a curfew. You will not be allowed to have X, Y, and Z people in there in your place. You may or may not be able to have a pet, right? Like there's still elements of punitive and carceral state happening here. And like Darrell has given none of these advocates any reason to think that he would be switching gears in that regard.
I mean, and this goes all the way to, like, the rules are, I think, an important point, because that those rules often ask people to part with, like, the only things that they have, right? Yep. Or give up the very last thing that they have, which is the ability to, like, hang out with a pal or stay out late or whatever.
Right.
But the other part of the conversation around the sanctioned violence and the carceral nature of sheltering folks is that, like, warehousing people experiencing homelessness in bunks that are very similar to what you might find in a jail, and offering people, a 1-inch or a 2-inch sleeping pad and, a flat pillow and, a throw blanket, these kinds of things are like, if we, one, it's harm and it's completely disrespectful, and it's rooted in this white supremacy that says, I am better than, right? Or you need to do what I tell you to do because you didn't make good choices or whatever the hell. And it really just, like, robs people of their imagination and their hope and their ability to, like, have any sort of quality of life. I mean, the stories that advocates hear about people who have to go into these shelter settings that are really just like not warm and welcoming, and they ask people to abide by rules that like no adult would ever
Agree to.
be asked
Yeah.
to
Right.
or agree
Yeah.
to. Like it's unfair. It's not just, it's not rooted in the language of wanting to help, you know, get 9,800 people off the streets of Sacramento, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's what happens when you have like someone that's so far removed from the issue up there, you know, and his people controlling that narrative. And as I said before, I do think that there are council members who understand the problematic nature of what like warehouse sheltering does to people, but we still have to name it as a problem.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of, I wrote a piece years ago about, you know, things folks experience when living on the street. And I spent a night in Union Gospel Mission to discuss that. And, you know, I think a lot of our city officials, our county officials will talk them up and be like, that's so great. All these men are, you know, having a bed at night. But, you know, you don't understand what it's like, the going in for the compulsory sermon, right? You have to listen to this religious sermon where they shame all these folks in there, and they're like, you know, you're homeless because you didn't do right by God.
Yep.
They don't talk about these compulsory, you know, group showers you have to do for this to stay here at this place, right? And then obviously you have to be in it by a certain time. You got to leave by a certain time in the morning. Like, it is shelter at its most basic sense.
Yep.
There's a roof over my head as I sleep, but it doesn't feel in any way humane, and you don't feel in any way like a person, and maybe this is taking it too far, but like, you don't feel respected. You don't feel like somebody worthy of respect.
I mean, that is what, if you were to find yourself in a space where you're asking a person experiencing homelessness whether or not they would like to be on the street or inside, I would guess, and based on my own experience, that the thing that will keep a person from going inside is, what are the rules?
Right.
That is such a common first question.
Mm-hmm.
And what can I bring with me?
Can I bring my family? Can I bring my pets?
Yeah. And here's the thing, like, we're talking about all of this and we don't necessarily know like what the rollout of all of this will look like, totally. Right? So this is all what we have right now in the master siting plan, the public document is, you know, we've got the sites, the proposed sites. But what we do have is a history of sheltering in this city to build off of. And so how are they going to do a complete like 180 from that in order to make an actual difference? Like, I think that's also part of my question. Like,
and they can improve, right? Like we're not just, you know, we're not just throwing this whole thing.
No, I mean, I would love for them to.
This is a whole history that we've seen take place that breeds mistrust from folks experiencing homelessness.
Right.
So I just wanted to bring up this one little thing. Like, in the piece in the op-ed by Katie and Mai, they lightly admonish 3 city council members.
Mm-hmm.
Angelique Ashby of District 1, Jeff Harris of District 3, and Rick Jennings of District 7.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're sort of saying, hey, you haven't done enough. You haven't pinpointed enough places with beds or shelter or whatever.
You think?
Did you see
recurring issue?
There's a little, I sent the group this little thing. I'm sure I'll share it publicly later. that shows which district it has presented what, how many existing sites they have, how many priority sites that I believe are already city owned, so you can just go ahead with it or something. Maybe that's not the term, sorry. And then tier 2 sites that still have some work to do. And then how many, beds or how many people, experiencing shelter that will result in. And at the very top, obviously, is District 1, and it is zeros across the board.
Yeah, and
Ashby has presented nothing.
Well, do you remember the meeting? Her presentation?
She said this isn't a problem in her district, basically.
She said,
wow.
She also said that in her district, there were issues with siting because of property ownership, blah, blah, blah. But her big thing during that meeting was, I'm so excited to present to all of you this whole motel conversion for families experiencing homelessness.
Right.
And that is the thing.
What a PR
for
stunt.
women and family. Yeah, women and families. But that's that's not like a set in stone thing yet. I mean, she has said that it's going to happen, but in terms of where is the motel purchased? Has the conversion begun? Because she's like, I'm out of here, right? I'm going, I'm running for state senate, so I'm bouncing. I'm gonna do jack.
But I think
she has been clear though that she doesn't really feel like this is an issue in her district. That has totally been, she has that from the beginning. She has said, well, I don't think, because when we had the conversation about every single district needing sites, her response was, I don't think that makes sense because the number of people experiencing homelessness isn't evenly distributed across all of the districts. And so I don't think that we should all be tasked with having to come up with sites.
Right. I don't want homeless people in my district.
Right.
Well, I guess maybe I have a somewhat of a more cynical read that she doesn't care. She doesn't want to address homelessness. And I think that for anybody considering voting for her for, state senate, this is the person you'll get at the Capitol. This is somebody who will not address the biggest problem facing our state today. Even her rival, Eric Guerra, also running for this, at least he has proposed something that will have, he's proposed over 400 beds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's got her beat there. At least he wants to address it somewhat. And I think folks should keep that in mind as they're considering who to vote for in the Senate race.
I mean, yeah.
Do we? Okay. I mean, we're wrapping up.
Mm-hmm.
Call to action.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I feel like I got kind of a tepid response with my original question, but do folks call in Tuesday and say, hey, I think we should go through with this? This is not the response I expected to.
Yeah, I mean,
fascinating.
Like I said, the thing that stands out to me is the criminalization piece. And that's the piece that makes me hesitate.
Yeah.
If that had not been the place that, the mayor anchored his proposal, I would probably say, without the same level of reservation, yes, this is not perfect, but it's a good starting place. But I just think when people tell you who they are, you have to believe them. When people tell you what they're trying to do, you have to believe them. And that's the part of this that makes me nervous. And that makes me say, I just feel so bad about saying no, because I feel like there is at least 300 people could be permanently housed with this, right? And many others we would at least have spaces for when storms and other things, or when the heat becomes, too hot and all of those kinds of things, where we would have more spaces available. And so I can't overlook that. And that's why I'm really hesitant to say no, but I'm just like, oh, this just feels like, you know what I feel? The same feeling I felt when we had to decide about whether or not to approve Measure U. I was like, I don't think this money is going to go to the right place, but I'm also worried about what happens if we don't have any, right? Like, and I just,
and when I went against it, Donnie Blumenstock told me I was crazy.
I mean,
Donnie, I'm calling you out publicly.
Yeah, this has the same feeling of like, my inclination is to say yes, but this is, I feel like, how we got so many times, is that my inclination is to say yes, and then it ends up not being what we wanted. And I like, at some point I feel like I need to learn the lesson of like, no, the answer has to be no, but I can't execute, everyone. I'm so close.
It's, in the entire 75-page piece that's, this proposal is, I don't think I've seen any language towards punitive, anything. I don't think I've seen anything about right to shelter or right to housing. The problem is the temporal juxtaposition of his press blitz a month ago. And I just feel like people have every reason not to trust him. I certainly trust Katie, and to a lesser degree, a whole lot more, but it's just hard. I mean, Darrell has really, really broken trust with, I think, a lot of advocates.
Yeah.
Here's where I think we are with this. Like, the reality is, in terms of a call to action, our ability to influence the master plan was during the workshops, right? That's when you had the opportunity to reach out to your council member, and like your public comment had a different kind of weight. The meeting on August 10th at 5 p.m. is a yes or no to move forward with the plan. My suspicion is that it's going to pass, that we're going to get a yes. And with that in mind, I think the call to action is, if you take a look at the districts where siting is not that great because they just haven't put the work in. For example, District 1, District 3,
Ashby,
and District
Harris,
and Jennings.
7 Jennings.
And then, from there you could argue some other districts. So if you're living in those districts, I think that the call to action is, if you live or work in those districts, I think the call to action is to reach out to that council member prior to the meeting, either by public comment or by email, and say that as this plan continues to roll out, that you hope that they would put more time and energy into citing more spaces, making sure that services are prioritized for people, like putting the call, asking them to, because the work has to keep rolling, right? Like all this is saying is, the vote is saying that it's going to keep rolling. So continue to be the bug in their ear, I think, is what has to happen.
Yeah.
Because otherwise silence means, if we don't continue to reach out, they all just think we're cool with it. Right? Like,
and I think putting concerns into the universe, making it so, even if you're a yes person, putting the concerns that we're expressing here, I think it's important to hammer that into their heads and let them know that this fight's coming. So like, are you going to be punitive or not? Because we're willing to take up that fight.
Yeah, and Darrell's not bringing this forward unless he already has 5 votes. So he knows he has the 5 votes. So I do think that you're absolutely right that the issue now is to focus on implementation,
Mhm.
and to continue to influence the things that we can. And I think that's there really are some clear opportunities to influence implementation. And so I would, yeah, I think that's where I would encourage everybody to focus their energy and attention. Is what are the things that you're concerned about, and can you continue to apply pressure even after the vote? Because sometimes we spend so much advocacy effort on getting things or not getting things that then when
Right.
they pass, everybody is exhausted and has to move on
Right.
to the next thing and doesn't follow it up. So this is something that we all really care about. I think we need to make a commitment to stay involved in some way, whether that's in the district that you live in, whether that is, overall with just like raising up issues as they come around how this rolls out. But I think that there's a role that we all can play. And if we all do our little bit, it's not an overwhelming burden for everybody. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of overwhelming burdens, I
I was trying to think of a segue. I didn't have one.
I'm gonna go. I took a couple of days off the end of this week, and I'm just like itching for some perfect takes. And I've searched far and wide for them, and I just don't know where to find them. But I was thinking, like, you two, so much about so many things. I go to Flow for everything related to poop and diseases.
When I think of Flow,
and I think
poop
of
and
poop and
diseases.
diseases. And Kempa, I was wondering, because when I think of you, I think of perfect takes. As the person who maybe knows where to find them. Can you help me?
Yeah, happy to help. There is a place called voicesrivercity.com that's been around for about 4.5 years, and it's got about 4.5 years of perfect takes just piled. It's a veritable Vesuvius of spewing perfect takes.
Vesuvius. Wow.
And you can find all of our work there. We have a store, voicesrivercity.com/shop. You can get the greatest merch there. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/voicesrivercity, Twitter @voicesrivercity, Instagram @voicesrivercity. That's always very funny. We are in many different places. I don't know. What I really would like you to do is we do Friday episodes that are patron only. We have many patrons. We would like more patrons, and they're the real ones. You'll hear us swear. You'll hear us be very silly. Those are really fun episodes, and we have a joy doing them because we know that the patrons just really, we know that they're invested in the work that we're doing. So if you want to become a patron and listen to those every Friday, patreon.com/voicesrivercity. Other than that, I am on Twitter @YouKnowKempa, YOUKNOWKEMPA.
I am Shan N.D. Stevens.
And I am Flojaune, FLOJAUNE.
And you might have read it on foxnews.com. Skylar is @Guillotine for You. Guillotine, the number 4, YOU.
Also, I forgot to mention this last week, but not only are we on the radio on Cuts FM, but if you don't live in Sacramento, like on the grid, you can stream us from their website at kutzfm.org. I told Mickey I was going to say that weeks ago.
It's a very new thing, and they're very excited about it. Yeah. Cool.
So you can hear us on the radio. I just wrote that song about it. So
yeah, I
love it.
Don't be jealous.
A song about it. Like to hear it. Here it goes.
On the radio. That's Regina
Well,
Spektor.
I guess that's the show, right?
All right.
Okay. We're done now.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, don't hang up.